Welcome to the finale. And as you guys already know, credits to Neptune for helping. I will leave the link to their channel in the description. Now let's roll with the video.
何としてでも勝つ。何としてでも生きる。
A communist group had been tasked with striking from behind. In terms of an agenda and her group, though, they would be the ones to serve as a distraction towards Esdeath and her group, the Jaegers. The distraction group, they were meant to be the ones to find Esdeath, Karoman, and Bolak. They managed to accomplish that in time, but when it came on to the other team, a communist group, for some reason, they had yet to arrive. This wasn't going according to plan. Tatsumi would be forced to access Venom's camouflage ability in order to sneak his way over to Bolak. He was hoping to be the one to actually finish the man off. When it came on to the rest of the group, though, they would be the ones to actually begin to fight Esdeath, knowing that she was the strongest one to worry about. Esdeath, unfortunately, was too strong for Night Raid. Esdeath would make quick work of Night Raid and begin to harm Leone. She would harm the lioness to an extreme degree. Tatsumi was able to hear her screams from basically a mile away. It irritated him. He knew that what Esdeath was doing was wrong. He knew that what she was doing was probably going to end up ending the life of Leone if he did not decide to actually step in. But at the same time, they had a mission. What was he supposed to do? He tried to block out the noise and focus on the specific goal of just taking down Bolak, but he just wasn't able to take it, though. He wasn't able to just block out the noise. Every time he tried to block out the noise, it just seemed to become louder. His heart rate began to increase at the same time as well. His stress levels were going up. He was getting more and more frustrated, more irritated. Eventually, he just couldn't take it anymore, and he decided to make a run for it. He tried to do a sneak attack against Esdeath, but she was able to sense him. She was able to sense his presence. So she was able to block his sneak attack by creating a large wall of ice. This attack, though, it would end up not going as well as she imagined. You see, what ended up happening is that although it was able to block Tatsumi's attack, the ice wall began to crack, though, which surprised Esdeath. Most of the time, nobody had the physical strength to actually be able to crack any of her ice walls. This would impress her. Even when it shattered, that impressed her even more. That rarely ever happened. Maybe when you were using the Tegu, but when it came on to Tegus as well, like, it's still a rarity. When it came on to an agenda, she would try and use Susanoo's trump card. This would end up enhancing the speed and strength of the living Tegu, so that it could accomplish the goal of killing Bolak. Esdeath would use her own trump card in response, though, which would end up freezing time. She would walk over to Susanoo casually and create an ice sword. This would be what she used to chop them down into several pieces. Time would resume afterward, and Esdeath would also be walking over to Venom. An agenda would have seen what ended up happening to Susanoo and be distraught. and she was wondering just what Esdeath was going to do to Tatsumi, especially now that he was out of his camouflage mode. Esdeath would be able to recognize the presence, even though they were invisible before. But now she was wondering what he was going to end up going through when it came on to Esdeath. Esdeath seemed to be a very sadistic kind of person. Najenda only hoped that she would end up going easy on Tatsumi, knowing that she seemingly had a soft spot for the boy for some reason. The other team would arrive at this moment though. At this moment, they would end up being the ones to accomplish the goal of killing Bolik. With their mission complete, Night Raid would end up heading out. Tatsumi would pounce on Esdeath, surprising her. And with the added weight, this would end up forcing Esdeath down to the ground. He would rub down her arms and legs, making sure that she wouldn't be able to just simply cut through the webs. Make sure that she wouldn't be able to just create some sort of ice weapon. Who knows, an ice blade, an ice sword, whatever sort of sharp item that she could create within a moment's notice in order to get her out of her bindings. He made sure to restrict her wrists and ankles so that she wouldn't be able to move like that. At least, he was hoping that this would be able to last for a good amount of time so that Night Raid would be able to escape. With the mission complete, Night Raid would of course head out, and Night Raid would actually take a less direct route to their base in order to fool their pursuers. Everyone would be healing from the last mission afterward. Knowing how tough Esdeath was, this was a learning experience for everyone, never to underestimate the strength of the Ice Queen. Mine and Tatsumi, they would be sent off to collect food for the group. And here, this was when Mine would actually confess her feelings with Tatsumi. This would surprise the brown-haired boy, knowing just how monstrous he was when it came on to using Venom. He never thought any girl would be attracted to him after seeing him eat somebody's brains. She would go on to even state that she had gotten used to the more cannibalistic ways, since she would usually detach Tatsumi from those actions. She would use it as simply saying that whenever he was using his Tegu, that just is how it is. It's sort of the Tegu's mechanism. It's not what Tatsumi is into, but it's just how the Tegu seems to work. Or for those unfamiliar with the term Tegu, Imperial Arms. So it no longer disturbed her, she just usually detached Tatsumi from those sort of actions. And to even prove what she was saying was true, she would end up walking close to Tatsumi, grabbing his face and pulling him in for a kiss. This kiss would seal the deal. The two would declare their love for each other to the rest of Night Raid afterward. They would also receive a new mission, with this involving infiltrating the palace. Tatsumi and Lubak would be the ones to head out, meeting with a member of the resistance in order to help with their mission. Unfortunately, they would find themselves walking into a trap set up by Sierra prior to their arrival. Sierra being the Prime Minister's son, the one to have actually teleported Esdeath and Tatsumi beforehand. Tatsumi would find himself fighting a losing battle against the high-ranking General Budo, who had a Tegu that produced electricity. This was probably the worst sort of match Tatsumi had ended up finding himself in yet, because of the fact that the heat produced from the electricity was making the fight even worse with Tatsumi and Venom. Tatsumi would be defeated and be forced to watch Lubak die right before his very eyes. He knew that he was weak to heat and what else? To heat and sonic vibrations or sonic waves, but he never expected to be defeated this easily from one of them. He was expecting that he would probably be limited in this moveset, but never to the point where he would basically be so weak that he could barely even fight. And now, because of his weakness, he would have to see the death of one of his friends, one of his closest friends that he made throughout this time in Night Raid. Seeing the death of Lubag ended up just causing a rage within Tatsumi's heart. This rage would boil over too. Budo would knock out Tatsumi afterward with an unadulterated rage, just constantly boiling over in Tatsumi. Every single moment, every single time, it would simply be Tatsumi just looking over what he could have done better, how he could have approached the situation better, and how he could have ended up saving Lubak if only he wasn't so stupid in the way that he fought Budo. Just maybe they could have had a chance. Maybe he wouldn't have to see Lubak die. Maybe he wouldn't have to see General Budo just stab his friend right through the heart. Just maybe. It would be pity. It would be a woe is me sort of moment. It would be him basically screaming at himself, telling himself that he could have done better each and every time. And every time he would also be looking at what Budo did to his friend. He wanted to kill Budo the most right now, because in his eyes it would be an eye for an eye, a life for a life. That's the only way this would ever be fair. When Tatsumi woke up, he would realize that the capital had set up a public execution for him in order to lower the morale of Night Raid. The public execution, though, would actually be crashed by Night Raid. Though they were able to rescue Tatsumi, they ended up being forced to sacrifice Mine and Bulat in the process. Tatsumi, seeing that he snapped right at that moment. The person that was basically meant to be his lover, his latest girlfriend. This was a girl that he loved. And now his friend Bulat as well. They had been together for so long. They had even been in missions together. And they had even trained together as well. Like, they've been through so much together. And now he saw the death of both of them at the same time. All because of the fact that he was too weak and he let himself get captured. Again. This infuriated Tatsumi. This made him so angry. Every moment, and just more and more suffering. When was it going to end? It was so miserable for Tatsumi. Tears would be flowing down his eyes as he just grabbed onto the two, barely hanging on to life at that moment. The two were barely hanging on to life, and Mine would say just a couple of words. Mine would say that she was glad to be able to have been able to be the one to make up for what she ended up having to go through back at Cower Rock. Basically, it went like this. She was just simply repaying her debt to Tatsumi after he saved her from the explosion. And when it came onto Bulat's dying breath, would be to make sure that the capital never got their hands on Incursio. Tatsumi would make sure to keep to that promise. Tatsumi would take Incursio and summon it, surprising everyone around there because to their knowledge, Tatsumi already had Tegu, so to see him taking another one seemed incredibly risky, although it wasn't impossible. It was rather reckless most of the time. Tatsumi, he didn't care though. As far as he was concerned, this was going to be the only way to make sure that the capital would never be able to get their hands on Incursio if he had it and he died with it. Karome would challenge Akame to a final battle, a duel against sisters, that Tatsumi would make sure not to interrupt. Tatsumi would see Wave try to interfere and grab the Jaeger by the head. He would smash Wave's head into the ground. Venom would wrap itself around Tatsumi's new armor, enhancing the strength and durability of it beyond its normal capabilities. His rage towards everything that just happened would be passed onto Wave. He would make sure that Wave would be the one to feel all of Tatsumi's suffering in that moment. He would bash Wave's head into the ground multiple times until their armor shattered and Wave was unconscious. It wasn't fun anymore afterwards. He just left Wave at that moment. Tatsumi would breathe heavily, trying to calm himself down. Akame would walk over to him afterward with her head down. She would rest her head on his chest, wondering what she should do now. Tatsumi would understand what happened back there and try to comfort her as best as he could in this state. He would try and calm down as well. Tatsumi, Akame, and Leone would infiltrate the palace after the constellation. They would get intercepted by Ren though. Leone would be the one to take on Ren, while Akame and Tatsumi, they would be the ones to handle the rest of the mission. Tatsumi and Akame would make it to the throne room, but at that moment they would see that Honest was the one to have actually managed to convince the young emperor to activate his bloodline's Tegu, which would end up forming a giant mech. Tatsumi and Akame would witness the destructive nature of the first Tegu, the one of myths and legends. Tatsumi would attempt to damage it, but he would only manage to leave scratches and a couple of dents on the Tegu. Tatsumi would grit his teeth in frustration until he saw a wave actually appear. He was just barely conscious. He had managed to wake up from being knocked unconscious from Tatsumi, but even now he was still going in and out of consciousness. The wave would still be bloodied up from Tatsumi's last attack as well. He was still conscious enough to fight. The two would make an alliance in order to put a stop to the Emperor. Wave and Venom would strike at the chest multiple times. Venom would use several webs in order to stay in the air. The two would have considerably damaged the Tegu in that area. They would strike one more time though, breaking through the armor and effectively disabling the Tegu. The disabled Tegu would begin to collapse though. Tatsumi had at first thought that this was going to be a victory, until he ended up seeing civilians trying to flee the scene. Innocent civilians, at least in his perspective. Tatsumi would try and web up the falling Tegu, but it would be ineffective. The webs would just fall through. And so he would have to be forced to launch his way back down to the ground and hold up the Tegu for as long as possible in order to save the civilians. Tatsumi would be at his absolute limit holding up such a large and heavy mechanism. Akame would arrive and see Tatsumi struggling to keep up the act of holding up the Tegu. Once she was able to confirm that the citizens had managed to flee the scene, Tatsumi would let go of the giant mech, shoving it over to the side. Tatsumi would be breathing heavily in exhaustion. The trouble wouldn't be over though. Esdeath would arrive moments later and whistle at their wake. She would applaud it too, before summoning an ice sword. Tatsumi would look over to Esdeath, frustrated, before launching an attack at her. She would quickly dodge the attack though, recognizing that he was a lot slower than before. She realized that he was tired. He was breathing heavily out of exhaustion, and she looked over to realize that he had also been trying to hold up the giant mech for who knows how long. That explained everything. Akame would request for Tatsumi to stand down during this fight. Tatsumi would be conflicted, but he'll be forced to listen in the end. Akame would go on to fight Esdeath herself. It would be a hard-fought battle between the two women, but eventually Esdeath would be the one to slip up. Akame would be the one to manage to land the final blow. Just one strike from her katana was all that she needed in order to effectively defeat the Ice Witch. And one strike to the chest was all it took for the poison to begin to spread from there on. Esdeath would accept the defeat and would attempt to walk over to Tatsumi. She would collapse before she could get into arm's reach of the other boy. Tatsumi would be the one to dig Esdeath's grave, hoping that in another reality they could have worked together in order to make this world better. Tatsumi's village would begin to receive a great amount of assistance from the new government afterwards. A new government, of course, was being set up after the death of the young emperor and the prime minister, with most of the government officials also being killed off as well. Especially the strongest one that they ever had to deal with being Esdeath, of course. Tatsumi would end up bringing Akame back to his village one day, where a great feast would be held for the two, although there would be a great amount of remorse and mourning over the lives that were lost in order to get to where they were at this moment. Finally, they were able to create a better world, but at the same time, they had to show respect for the many lives that were lost in order to get to where they were today. And that is how we end this story. Now, I just got one last thing to say. There was originally going to be a much darker ending, but I just couldn't see a way to really make that work with all of the conditions that were being added on later on in the story. And yeah, I apologize to Neptune for that one. I'm sorry, it just wasn't gonna work. So yeah, if you guys wanted to know, basically what was going to originally going to happen, it was going to be this. Venom would have been pregnant with Carnage. Carnage would have been passed on to Esdeath by mistake, and then, the final battle would basically be Venom and Tatsumi against Esdeath and Carnage, with basically everybody dying in the end. And yeah. Anyways, if you guys liked the video, of course you should maybe hit that like button. And if you guys like this video, you may want to check out some more of my content. Oh, and what else? If you guys like most of my content, you may as well hit the subscribe button. Maybe leave a comment or two. And oh yeah, if you guys have any friends who may like my content as well, Maybe share this video with others as well. It is your boy King Ty Nix, signing out. Peace.